It is good to see so many people here. Thank you as people are coming in. It's good to see you. We're just waiting for a few seconds for the teacher to join in, but I want to welcome everyone back. This evening is the third session of Community, Pluralism, and Difference in Halakhic Practice, where we will be looking at the question of, we want all our communities to be as open and inclusive as possible, but communities require shared understanding and standards. Through a range of halakhic case studies, we'll build a conceptual vocabulary for the complex work of community in the face of deep difference. Who can and should we daven with, and how? Who can and should we dine with, and how? Who can and should we learn with, share a home or neighborhood with? What will emerge from our studies is a clear-eyed vision of the challenges and opportunities of togetherness. It's a pleasure to come back and learn again with Rabbi Alex Ozar. It's always great to have you back. If you just came in, I'll be sending invitations to panelists so you can turn on your camera, ask questions directly, make for a nice Beit Midrash environment. I strongly recommend it. And once things get underway with Rabbi Ozar's teaching, I will share source sheets in chat. And I hope everyone has a good evening.
Thank you so much, Kayla. I'll give people one more minute to come in. Oh, it looks like we have a nice quorum already. We're doing pretty good.
Yeah, we do. It's good to see. It's good to see some names coming back. Hope everyone who's joining enjoyed the first two sessions. Didn't get scared away. That's great.
And Kayla, I'll probably I find it easiest to just share my screen so I can control the source sheet directly. The people can use theirs as well.
Sure, I'll just post the links for people to download if they don't have it at hand, but that sounds absolutely fine.
Great. Okay. I think we should dive in.
Are you able to share your screen? Okay, good.
Got it. My skills are getting better. They got very rusty. They were very good. I got extremely proficient in 2020, 2021. And thank God they've been a slightly less compulsory. I feel like I'm getting back up to speed. Anyway, thank you so much, Kayla. Thank you as always to Drisha, and thank you to everyone for coming back. It's really been a pleasure to learn with you the first couple of weeks, and excited for tonight and going forward. There's already a question in the chat. Oh, that's the source sheet. Great. Okay, Kayla, I'm going to trust you to monitor the chat. I'll do my best to.
I got you.
Okay. Well, good evening, everybody. A slight shift. It was a little bit of a detour, but not really a detour. It was the first couple of weeks we were focused. The setting of our focus was the dining room table. Who are we, and are we not willing, able to break bread with? When is the person across from us somebody we ought to not have our dining room table? When is it the case that despite the fact that maybe on some fundamental ideal technical level it would be ideal if we didn't dine with them, but we couldn't possibly not dine with them because their relationship is so vital and important to us, and because community is so important to us, that the bonds of our connection with each other are going to override any concerns we have about intermingling with the common folk and the masses, and then thinking through the kinds of modes of distinctively personal trust that are going to come into play, and also kind of humility, generosity, and hospitality that are going to become of necessity a critical part of our palette of virtues in pursuing our Jewish lives. But tonight I'm going to move into one of the other main principal sites of Jewish meaning, Jewish life, the shul, the Kehillah, Beit Knesset. Literally, Beit Knesset is the place of gathering, assembly, and congregation. The shul settings are both sites of they become the foci of our deepest spiritual, religious aspirations and fullest expressions of our identity, who we are as Jews. And they can also, precisely for that reason, precisely because they matter so much to us, they can become extraordinarily fraught and difficult places when we have to share those spaces with others. And it turns out, either because those others will have very different ideas about what the shul should look like, but very different ideas about other things of importance that come into play in the course of tefillah, Talmud Torah, and just being together as a community. Or sometimes there are just other personalities that kind of drive us crazy. We kind of drive them crazy, and things get difficult and hard, and yet we're all supposed to still somehow go to shul together, or maybe not. This is going to be a reprisal of the kind of dynamic I've been trying to exhibit, and I'm claiming is ubiquitous in all of these discussions and throughout the range of Halakhic literature. There's always going to be an oscillation between an impulse to togetherness and community and connection and closeness, and then an equal and opposite force, maybe not equal, but at least an opposite force of repulsion. We're going to be pushed away. There's a kind of fear and anxiety about being too close and being swallowed up and losing our identity, needing to differentiate ourselves and draw clear boundaries. But then we'll go through cycles where we'll draw close. We'll say, no, we need to pull back, draw boundaries, but then find ways to re-achieve connection once again. I would say in the current historical moment, thinking about the shul life as a sociological matter, I think we're at a point in history where the impulse towards communal togetherness is actually relatively low. I think people have a very strong sense. I think entitlement is maybe even too strong a word, but a sense that what they want or need out of shul life should be very closely tailored to their particular idiosyncratic spiritual, intellectual, emotional needs, and that their communities should very closely reflect their own values. And you get a lot of micro communities, and each shul will have multiple minyanim where you can choose the one that reflects exactly your set of dispositions. And a lot of people will, it was accelerated also through the pandemic period, where people have smaller minyanim in their homes where they don't need to deal with being a part of large, unwieldy shul structures, where they find situations where they're able to have more control and agency directly over what goes on and who exactly they're spending their time with. There's one brief story where actually it was the occasion for me doing some of this research. As we have at Yale on campus here, we have 3 minyanim. There's a Reform, Orthodox, and traditional Halachic egalitarian. It's been that way for a long time. The 3 minyanim get along very well, and we each do our own thing. And last year, one of our students, an amazing, extraordinary guy, and he had bounced between the Orthodox and the egalitarian minyanim, trying to find his place in the Jewish world. He has a very we could call it neo-Hasidic, has become the technical term, or Leibidic is the more traditional term. Is a very strong sense of spiritual dynamism, and he likes to dance and sing. But he also, and so that on Friday night for Kabbalat Shabbat made more sense. People had a better vocabulary for a lively musical Kabbalat Shabbat in the Orthodox minyan, where people are familiar with the Carlebach model. And Igal, he felt, was a little more straight-laced and more focused on decorum. And at one point he said, it would be great if I could make a 4th minyan that was egalitarian, but Orthodox style, that with enough people who had the Carlebach vocabulary for the singing and dancing. And this led to like a massive communal controversy because we just don't have enough people for 4 minutes. 3 minutes was already a stretch. But he was putting forward he was expressing a profound spiritual need that he had, and it was putting forward a compelling spiritual vision. And so it became a complex dynamic problem to think through how to balance. On the one hand, we want everyone to daven together, and we don't want to undermine the community that exists. On the other hand, we want to support this individual's spiritual vision, and for all we know, the extraordinary community that would form around him. So it's just an example of the kinds of dynamics we're going to be working through. And whereas in the first couple of weeks, we've been focusing on deviance, people who are breaking away from or subverting the traditional structures of authority in Jewish life and the kinds of threats they pose and how we relate to those threats. Here, less with people who anyone on any side could classify as a heretic or rebellious in any sense, but just intra-communal difference and disagreement. And what do you do when there are multiple visions of how to conduct the affairs in a single space? And when and at what point do we then say that maybe we ought to split? And how do we then balance saying we want everyone to be together, or we want everyone to be able to have their finely tailored experience that gives expression to their own unique spiritual valence? Daniel Sperman is a Paskin on this in Ada. I would love, I'm not familiar with that particular literature. I would love to see it. I'll try to look it up. Thank you. So I'll give you my version. As always, there isn't going to be a clear answer. There's no formula, but I'm going to try to sketch provide us with a spiritual vocabulary for approaching these decisions intelligently and with spiritual and Jewish integrity. So to start, and again, I'm going to try to be relatively brisk, but please do interrupt, use the chat, get my attention and Kayla's attention. I started here in the source sheet with a famous quote from David Weiss Livni. He was an Eastern European Talmud prodigy who came over to America and wound up at the Jewish Theological Seminary, became an extraordinarily creative, innovative Talmud scholar. And this is from a letter that he wrote, actually resigning from JTS. I believe it was 1989 when they decided to first ordain women as rabbis, which despite his intellectual and spiritual radicalism, his approach to the Talmud was not something that would have ever been acceptable in an Orthodox yeshiva. Now that's starting to change a little bit, but at the time it was totally radical. And on the other hand, his basically Orthodox Halakhic instincts. So he says, it was my personal tragedy that the people I daven with, I cannot talk to, meaning I need to daven in a more or less Orthodox shul setting. I don't know if he demanded a mechitza, but women are separate and men have certain rules, women have certain rules. And in general, it wasn't just a particular issue. It was a matter of how do we make decisions and how are these things thought through. And so the people I daven with, I cannot talk to because he says, I'm intellectually in a totally different orbit than most Orthodox Jews. And so I don't feel like I can have real intellectual conversations with them because we have totally different coordinates. And the people I talk to, I cannot daven with, but the people at JTS who he can learn with and talk to and have dynamic conversations with, he says spiritually, because of my commitments and my passions, I cannot daven with these people because they go about structuring their shuls in ways I cannot accept. However, and so what do I do if this is just my tragic choice between one or the other? When the chips are down, I will always side with the people I daven. For I can live without talking, I cannot live without davening. And I brought this here just to sort of highlight the stakes of these questions, where whatever other differences we have, intellectual, spiritual differences, The question of who we daven with is going to be fundamental. And the question of what does our shul look like? How does our shul feel? And can we feel a part of it despite whatever else is going on and whatever else is on our minds is going to be the most important question. Source number 2, again, by way of background, is I give this speech to our shul minyan community every year. I think it's really vital. It's possible to have a conception of shul and minyan as a kind of vehicle for individual religious fulfillment. So the conception would be every individual person has an obligation of tefillah, everyone has to daven, and then you might think some subset of the people, or maybe everybody, has an obligation to daven with the minyan. And then the shul is the venue that facilitates the individual fulfillment on the part of each and every person. So just like in order to do the mitzvah of lifting a lulav and esrog, I need to have a lulav and esrog. So I have a mitzvah to daven, and I have mitzvah daven with a kihila. And so the shul is this basic material that I need in order to do that. And I think there's a level in which that's true. That's a part of the story. But I think that conception gets it fundamentally wrong. And source number 2, I just gave the Shulchan Aruch's formulation. It's based on a Gemara and Brachot. Does Mishi Yeshlo Beis Knesset Be'iro? Somebody who has a synagogue in their city. Ve'eno nichnas bo lihtbalel, but they don't enter into it to pray. They stay home. They don't go to minyan. Nikra Shachin Ra. They're called a wicked neighbor. And if you want to put it positively, if you do show up to shul and you are part of your community, that makes you a good neighbor. It does not say, though it's true, but it does not say in the Shulchan Aruch that if you go to minyan, you're a good Jew, that your relationship with God is excellent or superior or better. Elsewhere, there are sources which talk about the quality of tefillah and the efficacy of tefillah being dramatically greater. The relationship with God is superior when praying in a shul and praying with a minyan, but that's not the focus of the Shulchan Aruch. The focus on the Shulchan Aruch is interpersonal and communal. The question is, am I or am I not a good neighbor, a good friend, a good part of our community? So what shul is fundamentally, most fundamentally, with the animating engine of shul is not the venue for fulfilling my individual religious obligation to God. It is fundamentally a matter of realizing my relations of responsibility with my fellow Jews, where the object of our common responsibility is tefillah to God. That's what we're joining together to do. That's the mission and purpose around which we create community. But the basic driving impulse of making a synagogue and showing up to synagogue and contributing to it and making it a place where a place where everyone can be a part and participate, that is fundamentally about being a good neighbor to each other and creating community. And this is a message that a train of thought, an idea that I think has really powerful resonance far beyond the confines of the synagogue. You can think about this in terms of politics, think about the national community or your local neighborhood community. You can think of it all as a arrangement of mutual advantage, where we all, you get this in like Hobbes and a certain version of Locke, where we all come together and form a polity because we're all better off working together than we are as individuals. So we all come into political community with fundamentally the same interests in our well-being, and then we just use each other and our interactions as vehicles for securing our own interests and well-being. And you can also think about interpersonal relationships. Even you can think of marriages this way. It's like, I want certain things, you want certain things. We're both more likely to get these things if we approach them together. And the point here is that all of that misses that there's something fundamental about the relationship itself, the community itself, that fundamentally that's what it's about. It's about our coming together and about our realizing our bonds of responsibility to and with each other. And then we then point towards what it is we're after. And then we may find that together we're after something far different and more transcendent than we're able to pursue as individuals. All by way of framing. Now, and I think that the numbers got out of line here because I added something in at the end. But in what now says source number 2 on my sheet, some basic halachic background. So this comes from a discussion, a long discussion in Masachet Yevamot. There's a Mishnah there I will probably come back to close this series of classes, but the description of several concrete disputes between Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai. People are broadly familiar with these two founding schools of Halakhic thinking, late Second Temple period. And they're deep and fundamental, broad disputes on a wide range of topics. And there's a question about how they were not able to carry on in community with each other. And the Talmud asks questions. It tells a story fairly well known about why we prefer the views of Beit Hillel. And in general, we always follow the view of Beit Hillel, with the very few exceptions. Every time there's a dispute, Beit Hillel wins. And then the Gemara asks, but what did Beit Shammai do? So we follow the views of Beit Hillel, those of us who come after, and we've resolved this dispute in one direction. But what did Beit Shammai do at the time when they were still actively disagreeing with Beit Hillel? Did they or did they not follow their own positions? And the Gemara has a debate about this. And it says on one view, they did. Beit Shammai, they were entitled to follow their own view. They certainly were just as from their perspective, they were every bit as authoritative as Beit Hillel. And so they followed their own positions. And the Gemara asks here, time source number 2. Sorry, I don't have translations tonight, but I'm going to do it all live. The Mandam or Asu, for those who say that they did follow their own views, Karinan kan lo titgotadu. But then this is a case of literally like thou shalt not slash or cut. So this really comes from a verse I'm dealing with the you shouldn't. It's about excessive mourning rituals and pagan mourning rituals where you would, in response to a loss, you would cut yourself. And the Torah says, absolutely do not do this. You are children of God. You shouldn't be maiming yourself, lacerating yourself in response to tragedy. There are more refined, better ways to process your grief. But the Chazal read this as Lotis Kadu, don't cut, meaning do not create schism. And there's a kind of reflexive grammar here. Do not make yourself such that you are split as a community. And they read it as lo tasu agudot agudot. Thou shalt not make yourself into multiple groups. The Jewish community is one. It's one kihila. And so you may not break into your smaller micro communities, each precisely tailored to your own particular idiosyncratic points of view. And so Beit Shammai, so if Beit Shammai was following their own view, and Beit Hillel was following their own view, it would seem to be in breach of this commandment to not break into groups, or factions is probably the right word. So Amar Abaye, he says, when is this a problem? When you have two courts within a single city. Meaning, if you have one town, any one town, you need to have uniformity of practice. You can't have two sheriffs in the same town, and you can't have two rabbinic courts that are actively disagreeing with each other. And so, like, within a city, it's just the integrity of Torah and the integrity of religious practice and the value, necessity of community requires that we not allow for any dissension in practice. Beit Shammai can think what they want, but when the chips are down, they need to get in line. Fall in line is the right phrasing. But if you had multiple cities, so there are people in New York and there are people in New Haven, it's fine for the people in New York to do one thing and the people in New Haven to do something else, because they're so far away, there's no thought that they're a community in the same way. They're not a concrete community. And so the fact that they conduct themselves differently is not a threat to any community. It's not like they're two factions. They're just in different places and there's no tension. Okay, so so that would be a problem. But if you had one city and two different sets of practices, that would be really bad. Well, but if you have two courts in two cities, but that's fine. So New York and New Haven, not an issue. Rava says, no. He says, because Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel, that was Shtei Bate Din B'Ir Achat. That was all in one city. So this doesn't solve the problem. How could Beit Shammai have practiced according to their own view, given that they were living in the same place, same geographical location as Beit Hillel? Shouldn't this have been represented a kind of factionalization, which we're aiming to prohibit? So Rava says, when does this prohibition apply? It's going Beit Din B'Ir Achat. When you have a single court, and plod more in Kedivrei Beit Shammai, and there's dissension within the court. So this would be, you've got one shul, and it just makes sense with one rabbi, but there are leaders of the one shul, and that shul doesn't get along. And then within the same shul, you have different people in different corners of the shul doing different things. That's problematic. But if you want to have two shuls in the same city, nothing wrong with that at all, because everyone will understand this shul does this one thing, and this shul, there's the Beis Shammai shul and the Beis Hillel shul, and there's no problem with that at all. You have one on this side of the street, the other on that side of the street, and you're totally fine. And the fact that it's the fact that there are two sub-communities within the same community practicing with differences in practice, even if there's significant differences, is not a threat to community, is one formulation. And because a citywide community is capacious enough to handle that kind of difference. Or we're just saying that once you have two separate shuls, you now have two communities, and we know it's fine for there to be multiple communities, and so there's no problem. It's not factionalization, it's not dissension, it's just multiplicity, and there's nothing wrong with multiplicity. Okay, so that's just an important background. Now we're going to just dive into a quick little tour of some of the ways this came up in the medieval period. It's genuinely fascinating. So this, in source number 3, is a tshuva responsive from Rabbi Eliyahu Mizrahi. Get the location, early medieval. He's most well known for his commentary, a super commentary on Rashi and the Torah. So he tells a story, al odot chiluf hadeot. He doesn't say what was going on, but he says there was some kind of, chiluf can mean like switching or exchange, or there was just some kind of dissension. There was a disagreement. Shenaflu bein hakahal. There was a congregation, there was a shul or community that, and kehilot in the medieval period they're not just shuls. They're like semi-autonomous governments which administer the affairs of the entire Jewish community on behalf of the local regime. But so there's some dissension, filuf hadeo, different opinions. And there's a minority that breaks away. And then, so this is the technical question here, v'nimsu bi'adam hakdashat shel hakahal they happen to be holding on to some of the shul's property and some of the sacred objects, I guess some of the Sifrei Torah, something else. And so the question is, do they have to return, if they do want to break away, do they have to give the Sifrei Torah back or whatever it is they took? And do we say, this is a general Halakhic principle, that the minority is always nullified in the face of the majority? So if you have a little bit of milk drops into your meat cholent, we say the milk is nullified. It just doesn't matter. And if you have 10 kosher pieces of meat and one non-kosher piece of meat and you lose track of which one is which, you can just eat all of them, it's fine. And so here, the minority should lose, and so they should have to give the property back to the majority. I see there's a question in the chat.
Yep. Rachel Block points out, isn't a Beit Din possibly a different case than a shul?
Tell me why.
Rachel, you want to comment?
I mean, it feels different to me. It would make sense if sort of over the centuries, the halacha like moves to shuls, but going into shul to daven feels like a much lower stakes thing than going to a Beit Din to get divorced, to, convert, anything like that. It's a much different situation.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. So you're saying we might have a much higher tolerance for breaking up into factions within shuls. At the end of the day, what difference does it make if you have multiple shuls? But if you have competing bate din sources of rabbinic authority with like majorly high stakes cases, so that could lead to significant problems. It's a really interesting claim, and I think on one level, like, we will see that played out significantly in that at the end of the day, we're not going to stop the multiplications of shuls. We're not going to stop breakaways precisely because the proliferation of individual spiritual visions is going to be good. Thank you, Rachel. It's a really good point. Is this emphasis on communal cohesion a question of survival and where to consolidate social capital and give unity? All of the above, clearly. Although we'll see, you use the word social capital. So we're already seeing part of it is going to be literal capital. There's just a question of the conservation of funds. Not every community has the resources to support multiple overlapping institutions. And that can be a problem. And then sometimes it's just a matter of, well, like, who gets to keep the Sifrei Torah, or who gets to keep the shul endowments. And then also you get questions where the shul represents the livelihood of an individual rabbi. And then if there's a competing shul, so then is the prohibition on what's called hasagat gvul, which literally means encroaching on somebody's border. So like a border marker. So I adjust the property line between your and my property so that I get a little more of it, and try to do this without you noticing. This comes to connote like predatory competitive practices where you open up a shop in your alleyway, then I open up a shop selling the same thing in your alleyway, but I do it better and drive you out of business. And so here you've got rabbis whose livelihoods are threatened by the proliferation of breakaways. This is that also. I think all of the above. And we'll see a few different ways in which this plays out. Great, thank you guys. Please, more questions. So this is what he says. He is a very extremely powerful pro-communal cohesion and solidarity. He says, and I cut out a lot here, but he says, look, bottom line, in addition to saying, well, they're the minority, so they should lose, Gam ha-pirud shenifridu mehem in the second paragraph here, what they did was wrong. They had no right to break away. Your job, your responsibility as a member of a community is to follow the majority. And he says this is what the Torah commands us. He borrows, I think this is unique in Halakhic literature. I've never seen this anywhere else. He says the verse, which is a creative rereading of the original biblical verse, it really literally means you shouldn't follow the majority view to subvert justice, but the rabbis take this to mean you should follow the majority view on the courts. If you have 3 justices and 2 of them say that the person is guilty and the person is guilty, 23 justices, the majority say that the person is guilty, and you follow the majority. And so he says the Torah is clear, and this is again the blending of the judicial and the communal synagogue settings. He says, just like we follow the majority view in the court, we follow the majority view in a shul. And if the majority of people want things to be a certain way, that's the way it's going to be. And it's your job as the minority to find a way to get along and handle the fact that you've lost. So you can campaign and try to win a majority, but if you don't, then you have to go along with it. And that's part of your religious responsibility, because we cannot allow communities to break apart. And then he says, in the next paragraph, and so let's take for granted, he says, they weren't allowed to break away. And they should make an effort, now that they have broken away, they should make an effort to go back to the original shul, go back to their community, and try to find ways to daven with their friends and make the community work. As, again, to fulfill the mandate of the Torah, V'achar kach im yirtzu yachid or rabim latzeit machmat she'ena bayit mechilatam. So this is interesting. So he says, look, bottom line, let's say there's an individual or there's a group of people who say we need to leave the shul not because of chiluf deyot, because there's some kind of disagreement on principle, but because the shul isn't big enough. It's a small space and they need more room. So let's go create another building or make another wing. Or some other pragmatic reason where it's just a matter of like they live further away and they want to start a new shul in their own neighborhood. Not because of disagreement. So he concedes that if it's a matter of just pragmatism, like you just need a different shul and there isn't enough room in the old one, it's not wheelchair accessible. Like there's just some reason, just functional, pragmatic reason why you need to break away. That he says is great. As I find this totally fascinating. Pragmatic, utilitarian reasons are completely legitimate, but ideological reasons and reasons of principle are not, because those is assuming everyone, there's some sphere of general broad legitimacy, but assuming everyone is basically legitimate, like Beit Hillel and Beis Shammai thought each other's views were, they thought each other were, Beis Hillel thought Beis Shammai was wrong, and Beis Shammai thought Beis Hillel was wrong, but they all thought they were reasonable, respectable views within the sphere of legitimacy. So when it comes to that, we have a positive obligation to get past our differences. Again, I just find fascinating and kind of beautiful and also kind of radical that our job is to either put aside our deepest spiritual differences or find some way to reconcile them, or if we are unable to suffer the fact that we've lost this round, to find some way to win the next one and convert everyone to our view. Extremely powerful. So the next source, so the Radvaz, again, medieval period, radically opposite view. So in his case, I think the issue, there was some fight that broke out, some disagreement, and people just weren't getting along. It's not clear that there was an ideological element, there may have been, but people just weren't happy with each other. We have a Halakhic obligation to work out from Lindsay. We have a Halakhic obligation to work out differences. What happens when a dispute escalates into, say, legal action or public conflict? Is reconciliation possible? So in real life, these things often will go to courts for mediation. And then the question will be whether the community will accept the authority of the court if they don't get the answer they want. And part of what I heard you asking is, once these things become litigious, is there any possibility of just interpersonal reconciliation? Are they going to be able to share a space together anymore? And the answer will often be no, but I think sometimes yes. Sometimes getting a clear court ruling from a well-accepted authority is precisely what forces everybody to stay together. More to say about this, but I want to keep moving. And thank you, Lindsay. So he says, he quotes a set of teachings about the conditions for proper tefillah. It says, "Ein omdim lehitpalel lo mitoch slok, lo mitoch kalas rosh, lo mitoch sicha, lo mitoch l'riva, lo mitoch tas." You're not allowed to start davening from a spirit of levity or from gossip, conversation, and certainly not from fighting or anger. If you're in a position, if you're feeling angry, that's not the time to start davening. You need to get control of your emotions before you engage in tefillah. And story, and then it says, "Kol she'ein daitem yoshevet alav al yitpalel." If you're not feeling settled in your mentally, psychically, you shouldn't daven. And it says Shmuel wouldn't daven in a place where there was open alcohol because the smell would bother him and he wouldn't be able to concentrate. Lamarata mikol hani shelo yitpalel ad lo makom shetorin mashtavo as much about talis kavato. You shouldn't daven. Is a presumptive kind of prohibition. One should not engage in prayer in a place where their mind is occupied or where they're distracted or unable to concentrate. Ume'ata, in the bold here, hayachido rabim sheish lahem eva, osina, okas, omuriva, imetzibur. let's say you have an individual person and they're angry, they have contempt, hatred, or just in a fight with their community. Ein tfilatam ritzuyah. Their tefillah will not be acceptable before God, or it won't find favor. In the same way that you can't daven when you can't concentrate or you're distracted, or you're just feeling too lighthearted and jovial. You also can't daven when you're angry. And when the person in front, you can't stand the person in front of you. And you're worried about what you're going to say to them or what they're going to say to you after davening. The whole time you're davening, all you're thinking about is the fight you're having. That's no way to daven. V'asur lahem litpalel sham. He says it's prohibited to daven there. Shemach savatot screwed up, because your mind will be elsewhere, and you won't be able to concentrate and feel it. But kol shekeni machisin oto panav tamid. If they're actively making you angry, meaning it's not just a fight you had some other time, but they're like, you're gonna keep fighting, and you know you're gonna keep fighting when you see them. You can't daven there. And then if the anger is with the leaders of the shul and the kihila, it's like all the more so. And it says, "V'i loved mistafina." He says, "I'm scared to say this, meaning I don't feel like I have enough clout to make this radical claim. But havamina the tavle litpalel biyachid. It would be better to daven at home on your own. Than to daven in a place that's not with a community that's not agreeable to you, people you don't get along with." And again in the bold here, but sorry, read the go back line. Positively, you should only daven in a place where your heart desires, where you want to be, where you're happy to be there. And just like the Gemara says that you only learn Torah in a place where you feel happy and where you want to be. And the reason is when you look at somebody you do like, and you look at somebody you do want to be in community with, you do care about, and you do love, and you're excited to see, and you're happy to share a space with, then your spirit is awakened towards the fullness of kavanah, intention, of proper spiritual ordering. And your mind expands, becomes more capacious, your soul expands. V'libo sameach, and your heart is happy and joyous. V'nacha alav az ruach Hashem. And at that point, the Spirit of God rests upon you, as the rabbis say with regard to prophecy, that the spirit of prophecy only rests upon the prophet when they're in a state of joy and contentment, but not when they're in a state of anxiety. And so he says, look, I don't care what the argument's about. I don't care if it's something small or big. I don't care if it's a matter of ideology or conflicting spiritual visions. I don't care if it's about money. I don't care if it's about who got the third aliyah or who got maftir last Shabbos. Whatever it is, I don't care if you cannot get along with these people and you resent them and you dread seeing them, or you're looking forward to seeing them so that you can use that zinger you've been storing up and really, really dig into them. In any of these scenarios, this is not a place you should be davening. It's directly contrary to the institution of the Beit Knesset to have an arrangement like this. And so if what needs to happen is that the shul needs to break apart, then the shul needs to break apart. And then he goes on to say, well, but don't we know, the Gemara says in several places, there's this principle is from a verse in Mishlei, Barov Am Hadrat Melech, that the glory of the king is in the abundance of the people, that the greater the masses you have, the larger the crowd, the greater honor it shows to the king, and so the greater honor shows to God. And so we should want to have as many people davening in the same room at the same time as we can. And so in the bold here, it says, so if it's a question of one individual going to daven somewhere else, that's not a problem. Nobody would ever think that was a problem. But because then he's adding to the number of people in the other shul. So if there were going to be, he was going to be 100 there's gonna be 99 instead of 100 people in shul A. There'll be 100 instead of 99 people in shul B if he goes to the other shul. So that's it's water under the bridge. Doesn't make any difference. About tzibur hamitchalek, but if you have one large shul and that shul breaks apart, af b'shem rishayim, even if you think it's permissible, so it's like there's a loss there, and he wants to make that clear. There's something being sacrificed if we break up the shul. But halo kasha dekevan shehem libot chalukim. But again, he says, if they have hearts that are at odds with each other, en kilusan olayefa, their prayer will not go well. It will not rise up to the heavens. Lefikach, therefore, he says, nagu bechol glilot Yisrael, in all of the diaspora, everywhere where there are Jews, shekol b'nei ir, every city, v'lashon echad, and this he's talking about in situations after the Spanish expulsion. We have migrant communities living in individual metropolises. Like you go to a place like Amsterdam, and there's like the Spanish Portuguese shul, and then the local Dutch people, and there are people from other communities, and so you have communities that speak different languages. And so now it's very familiar. We have in the same city, in the same community, you'll have the Ashkenazi minyan, you'll have the Nusach Sfarad minyan, and you'll have the Edonim Mizrach minyan, and you'll have the Chabad minyan, the Chassidish minyan, and they all just have different liturgies, they use different sitters, they speak different languages, they have totally different coordinates. And so he just says this is what everyone does. Everyone is always going to have their own shul that fits their own smaller portion of the community. And they're not going to mingle. They're just the Lashon Acher and people who speak a different language, because they're going to stick with the people that speak the same language. He says no rabbi has ever objected to this, because he says geography and language leads to differences in hearts. You get deep personal differences from that. And you can't. It would just be a mess. It wouldn't work well if you had a bunch of Sfaradim and a bunch of Ashkenazim trying to daven together. They'd just be, even if they were all like maximally generous and committed to the project of communal tefillah on the basis of mutual respect and reciprocity, they just would never be able to figure out the right formula to make everybody happy and to make it feel like they're at shul. And either one group was always going to be alienated by the way shul was conducted, or everybody was always going to be alienated by the way it was conducted. I'll tell a concrete story. So I said we have our Reform, Conservative, and Orthodox minyanim. And a good night, if you stand in just the right spot, you can hear all three. It's really beautiful and wonderful. Once in a while, we've actually stopped doing this because I won this fight, but there was a push for a while to once in a while for all three minyanim to daven together. We call it pluralistic Kabbalat Shabbat, and it really the impulse was deeply beautiful. It said, like, and especially with the Kabbalat Shabbat before Mariv, where you don't have the same technical Halakhic stakes, it should be possible for us all to find a way to construct a tefillah experience where everyone can feel included and that reflects their values in some way. And so there are really various parameters, and a lot of negotiation, a lot of thinking, and for a lot of students, it was really intensely meaningful to figure out a way to construct a Kabbalat Shabbat service that could include everyone from Orthodox to Reform. But also, somebody was always mad and alienated by the end, because somebody would do something that was offensive or that was just not sufficiently sensitive to one of the other groups. Something would always go wrong, no matter what. And there would be some people who just weren't comfortable with the whole project at all. And from my perspective, I said they called it pluralistic Kabbalat Shabbat, but this was actually, I said every other week we have pluralistic Kabbalat Shabbat because we have three minyanim. This week it was monistic Kabbalat Shabbat, where we tried to make one minyan out of three. And so that was, again, showing both sides. And I'm being a little, I showed my cards, betrayed my sympathies in that situation. But both impulses were very real and powerful. On the one hand, like, it was beautiful and amazing and wonderful and a deeply valuable project to try to construct a shul experience where everybody could daven together despite their spiritual and ideological differences. And on the other hand, like the Rabbi is saying, at the end of the day, tefillah is too important to attempt what will wind up being a false unity. and a unity that's going to paper over differences in ways that are going to leave people feeling alienated and frustrated and bitter. And then if they're in that state of mind, they're not going to be able to daven well. And so he just says the natural way, the way things should be, or maybe in some ideal sense, we would all be davening in the Beit HaMikdash, and it would be clear exactly how the davening is supposed to go. We'll reveal the one true Nusach for how it's clearly Eidot HaMizrach and Sephardic communities are much closer to the original. But anyway, Nusach Sfar is a little more complicated, but it'll all be clear, and we'll all know exactly how we're supposed to do this. But the truth is, even then, I think even then, there'll still be an need. And we know there were other Batei Knesset in Yerushalayim, even when the Beit HaMikdash was standing, because still you're going to have the people who want the longer davening, you're going to have people who want the shorter davening, and you're going to want to have people who you're going to have the teen minyan, and you're going to be fights between the older people and the younger people. And you're going to have this kind of drasha at the minyan, you're going to have that kind of drasha at the minyan, you're going to have people with this kind of political orientation, that kind of political orientation. And it is always going to be necessary. And so long as we are human beings, we Jews are human beings, which will always be the case. There's going to be real positive value in our each finding our own smaller communities where we know everybody, everybody knows each other's name. We're uniting around not just Jewish practice and not just tefillah, which is a powerful point of unity, but sometimes we need to think a little more. Maybe the people we learn with every day, and then how to use the Leibniz line, or the kinds of people we want to talk to, if we can get that right and have shuls where we can daven with the people that we want to be talking to. That is in one sense ideal, but it's going to be a complex balance. I'm not going to do all of the material I had here. I want to finish a couple minutes early. I finished a couple minutes late last week, and I'm very tired. But I'll just outside, I gave you a couple chuvot from Rav Moshe Feinstein, which go in a couple different directions. He was generally very skeptical of pushes to split shuls, and this is like mid 20th century. So in one case, he says, I'll just read the one bold line here. He says these people are saying that they're doing this for good, noble, ideological purposes. They want to create a breakaway shul. He says, I don't buy it. Raku inyan politica. I think it's all political. And what do they really want? And it's mitzad koach hayetzer v'hasatan. It's from the side of the evil inclination. It's satanic. Asher bavanotehem rabim raked beinan. This is Satan dancing among them that they want to do this. And he spells out in other places. He thinks either they want to create a conservative shul and break away from the Orthodox shul, or it's just some illicit form of communal dissension that he can't subscribe to. And he dresses this up, and I mean, I don't mean he's disingenuous, but he was very solicitous of the needs of individual rabbis and their livelihoods, and he was very concerned that if there's one older rabbi who's had the shul forever and he owns the building, and then they create another shul across the street, and then he loses all his people, nobody's paying dues anymore, and he constructs this case, or he thought it was real, that the rabbi owned the real estate of the original shul and would depreciate in value, and so he'd lose his retirement savings. And so you can't do this to the rabbi; it's not right. But then in a corollary case, it was a case in Scranton where he says there were 4 shuls, and what they wanted to do was join together and fuse and make one shul. This is the opposite case. And there he also said, absolutely not. And part of it was because he was worried they were trying to create a conservative shul. But part of it was, he says, look, there are going to be people who live in one corner of town who are going to need their little shul closer to them. And so it's not right to create one big shul that's going to be an inconvenience for everyone else. Anyway, a really interesting set of cases. But just to conclude, this is a tshuva from Rav Asher Weiss. He's a major figure in Israel now. So he's American-born. He's born in Detroit. He's a Swedish figure, but he's become one of the most prominent poskim in general, and fascinatingly has become a prominent modern Orthodox posek, despite him not being modern Orthodox by any measure. But he just has a level of worldliness and just capacity to converse and relate to people in modern Orthodox circles that he's become a major resource for guidance. I think this was a tshuva was actually written to a modern Orthodox shul in Boca Raton, Florida. But so he goes through all the different considerations, and he says, like, the Rav Moshe Feinstein's concerns that you might be ruining the other person's livelihood. He says that's serious, you should be careful, but it's not a real prohibition. It's always fine to create competition, and certainly for this kind of thing. And in fact, competition can be good. It can be good to have competing shuls, competing schools, because then people will be driven to do their best work. But he says, "Nira ikar b'zel dati." He says, "This is what I think the basic idea is. Diyesh reshut biat hamiyut lifrosh lakim beit knesset mishalahem." Bottom line, a minority has the license to create their own shul and start a breakaway. And he says this happens all the time. It's part of the way of the world. But he says they have to be properly motivated. It's always going to be hard to figure out whether people are really properly motivated, or at least hard to hold them to it. But he says it has to be laharbot Torah, because they want to learn more. They want to create more Torah. Ukvod Shemayim, and they want to, they're doing it for the greater glory of God. That somehow creating this new shul is going to increase rather than decrease the glory of Hashem. And so he says, let's say there's a subset of the shul that then he says the young people, what they want is a more Torani shul, a shul where traditional yeshiva style Torah learning is a more prominent part of the daily life of the shul. And there's more of a feeling character of constant striving and learning. There's more care and the particulars of observance. And that's why they want to create their own shul. The Kol Ki HaGavna says anything like that, where there's a spiritual vision, and it's a good, positive spiritual vision, and they want to realize, they can realize this within a smaller, more selective group, or self-selecting group of people. It's totally fine. It's legitimate for them to start a new shul under those circumstances. Or just practically, they need another shul in the other part of the city where it just turns out people moved into the new neighborhood because there's cheaper real estate there, and now it's too far to walk to the other shul, so they want to start their own minyan. Fine. They don't need to walk too far. And then he just says, and it's the same calculus, because if more people go to shul, that means more people, because it's closer to walk, so there'll be more davening and more learning Torah, and that's good. Sof davar, at the end of the day, kasher kan matam l'shem shemayim, Ika Halakhic kashitat rivash, like we saw earlier, the position that sorry, actually we skipped the rivash, but he says, look, at the end of the day, if you have a group of people who are saying, and they're saying credibly, what we want is to start a new enterprise of Tefillah and Talmud Torah and Yirat Shemayim, and we want to realize our spiritual vision, how can you say no? And the Rivash says you can't say no. Because that's ultimately what it's about. And we want people to be creative and proactive in their spiritual lives, and want people to try to move. We don't ever want to assume that the way we're doing things now is the best, is the ideal, that we've fully figured out the formula for how to construct Jewish communal life. And if someone's saying they have a good idea for how they're going to do it in this city, we should not stop them, we should support them, we should encourage them. The more flowers, the better. The more shuls, the better. Assuming it's all possible. And so that was when, to go all the way back to the beginning. So I said I had an amazing student. He's an extraordinary guy, extraordinary soul, an extraordinary leader. And he wanted to start this new Friday night minyan that fit his exact spiritual vision. And I told him, look, I don't want you to do this, because you're going to pull people away from my minyan. You're going to pull people away from the other minyan. It'll be at a huge cost, and I'm a little worried about what the implications will be. But I know you, and I know you're doing this for the right reasons. And I know that you, as a young person and a dynamic person, you see spiritual possibilities that wouldn't have occurred to me And so I certainly cannot tell you no. And you're going to have to decide for yourself. And in the end, you decided not to. And that's where I'm going to leave the share for tonight. Next week, we're going to go back and dig into more of the questions of heretics and deviants and how to what generates those kinds of categories, and then how they're processed in the course of Halakhic time. Thank you all so much, and please feel free to reach out, be in touch at any point. Have a great night. And thank you to Kayla, and thank you to Drisha.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I hope everyone has a good evening. And if you want to learn more with Drisha, we have a new class starting this Sunday. This is Mishnah in Depth, Masechet Nidarim. This is a continuation of our Tuesday night class that is ending this week, roughly following the Mishnah Yomi schedule. And with that, I want to wish everyone a good night and hope to see you in next class. And Rabbi Ozar, if people want to email you, where can they get in touch?
So I've given it out before, but they just alexozar@gmail.com will do the trick.
All right.
Okay,
Take care.
thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night.